Rancher helped a dying native child, then 200 warriors surrounded his barn. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to subscribe and like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. 200 riders waited in the fading light outside Jonathan Hale's ranch. Their horses stood silent, tails swishing against the desert gnats, painted faces staring straight at his front door. Spears gleamed in the last stretch of sun, bows strung tight. Not a word was spoken, not a cough, not even a snort from the animals. The valley itself seemed to be holding its breath. Yet less than a day ago, the only thing Hale had done was break a stale crust of bread in half and hand it to a boy. The wind-hollow basin never whispered. It scraped like metal on stone. It cut across the skin, dry and merciless, a voice older than memory. Jonathan Hale knew that voice too well. He was 36, caught between youth and old age, worn down by the Civil War and the years that followed. He had survived betrayal, seen brothers buried without hymns, watched whole towns vanish into dust. And through it all, he'd learned that peace was never gifted.
It was hammered together by hand, nail after nail, like the fences he built each morning. That was what he had carved for himself here, on this forgotten edge of New Mexico territory. Hale's ranch wasn't much. A few bony cattle, a crooked corral, a roof that moaned when the wind shifted. But it was his. And here, in the loneliness of the basin, he could breathe without the weight of other men's wars pressing on his chest. That afternoon had been like any other. Sweat rolling, hammer striking, sun beating down without mercy. He worked the southern fence line, boots sunk in sand, breath steady as the strokes of his hammer. A hawk circled overhead, once, twice, then slipped away into the horizon. And then it happened. The kind of silence he recognized too well. The horses in the corral froze, not calm, frozen. The chickens stayed hidden. Even the insects seemed to vanish. Hale set his hammer down, hand instinctively moving to the revolver on his hip. He'd known this silence before, just before ambushes, just before funerals. He followed the dry creek, boots crunching gravel, every step measured. He thought he saw movement behind a sandstone outcrop, a shadow too still to be animal.
His thumb touched the revolver's hammer. "Don't move," he said softly. But the figure moved anyway. Not an enemy scout. Not a man at all. A boy, no more than 9. Skin burned from the sun, lips cracked, shirt torn to rags. His ribs showed through the fabric, his eyes too large for his thin face. He didn't plead, didn't even flinch at the gun. He only crouched lower, staring at the ground like it might give him something to eat. That was when Hale saw the dirt beneath his hands, clawed open, scraped raw. The boy had been digging for roots. There was nothing there. Jonathan's revolver dropped back into its holster. He reached into his satchel and pulled out the last piece of bread he had. Hard, old, barely edible. He placed it on a flat stone and stepped back. The boy lunged like a starving wolf. And in that instant, Hale knew. Whatever fate had been waiting to find him in this valley had just walked into his life. The boy tore into the bread with both hands, chewing so fast his teeth scraped against the crust. He didn't taste it, he devoured it, eyes wet, crumbs spilling down his shirt. Jonathan Hale stood still, throat tight, a strange recognition pressing in his chest.
Not memory exactly, but something deeper. No child should eat like that. For a long while neither spoke. The desert wind rattled through brittle mesquite branches, and the sun slanted low, staining the horizon copper. When the boy finally lifted his head, Hale saw more than hunger in those eyes. He saw surrender. A hollow, bone-deep surrender that said the world had already taken everything from him. "What's your name, son?" Hale asked gently. The boy didn't answer, just kept clutching the bread, chewing slower now, as if afraid it might vanish. "You hurt?" Hale tried again. Still nothing. Until the boy shifted and his shirt slipped open. Hale's breath caught. His back was covered in welts, angry red ridges, raised and swollen, cut so evenly it looked like someone had marked him with a ruler. Not punishment, ritual. The kind of scars men carried as symbols, not sentences. Jonathan looked away, not from disgust, but because he didn't want the boy thinking he was counting each strike. He knew the pattern. He'd seen something like it once, years ago, on an Apache prisoner the army had dragged through camp. They called it the whipping of spirits. Back then, Hale hadn't believed it.
Now, staring at the boy, he wasn't sure what to believe. He holstered his revolver and held out a rough, calloused hand. "Come on, let's get you washed up." For a moment, the boy only stared at him, wild and unsure, like a stray animal caught between fight and flight. Hale turned and started walking back toward the ranch, not pressing. 5 paces later, he heard soft footsteps in the gravel behind him. By the time the sun dipped behind the ridge, Jonathan Hale had a stranger beneath his roof. The cabin creaked as night settled in. Inside smelled of smoke and saddle leather. Hale stirred a pot of beans and chili that had been simmering all day. He broke a small piece of cornbread from his emergency stash and handed it across the table. The boy ate in silence, eyes fixed on the fire. Hale didn't push. He'd seen enough soldiers return from things they couldn't explain, let alone speak about. The boy's silence was its own language. After supper, Hale set a basin of warm water by the hearth. "Wash if you want," he said. The boy hesitated, then stripped off his torn shirt. In the firelight, his back looked like a map carved in red and shadow, every welt deliberate, every mark heavy with meaning. Jonathan Hale didn't ask. Some truths weren't meant for questions. He just handed the boy a blanket, pointed to the cot by the fire, and stepped out onto the porch. The coyotes cried far off in the hills. The stars blinked awake. Hale lit his pipe but didn't smoke it. He only sat there, staring at the ridgeline, the weight in his chest heavier than the night air. He'd given away his last piece of bread, and something far rarer, his distance. The wind whispered across the valley, but Hale's bones told him the truth. Trouble had already crossed his fence line. To continue this adventure, please subscribe to our channel. It helps us keep creating. The morning came too still. No wind, no birdsong, no creak of the rafters above Jonathan Hale's bed. His old hound whined low, tail tucked, hackles stiff. Outside, the horses pressed themselves tight against the far corral fence, eyes wide, ears pinned flat. Hale had lived in the basin long enough to know what that meant. Trouble. He pulled on his boots, opened the cabin door, and froze. They were everywhere. A wall of riders stretched across the horizon, their horses painted in ash and ochre, their faces marked in fresh war paint. Some wore feathers braided into their hair, others carried bows strung tight across their backs, but none spoke. None moved. They just watched, silent as stone. 200 eyes fixed on his small ranch house like judges waiting for a sentence to be read. Hale stepped off the porch slowly, his boots crunching on the dry earth. He didn't reach for his rifle. It would have been pointless. This wasn't a raiding party. This was the nation itself, come in full measure. The warriors parted only when one man rode forward. His horse was the color of smoke, and he carried no ornament save for a long buckskin robe. His face was weathered like canyon rock, his gaze sharp and unyielding. Chief Tall Eagle. "You sheltered the boy," the chief said. His voice carried like thunder, though it was barely above a whisper. Hale nodded once. He was starving. He's still a child. Chief Tall Eagle dismounted. In his hand hung a whip, not brandished, but held low, the leather blackened and flaked with old blood. He let it rest across both palms, like something sacred rather than cruel. "He is no ordinary child," the chief said. "He is my brother's son. From birth, the spirits marked him to lead when my bones are dust.
The stripes on his back are not punishment, they are covenant, each one a prayer, each one a burden. Hale's jaw tightened. Burden enough to kill him? The chief's eyes narrowed. Had he endured, he would be honored, but he fled. He broke the circle. His voice dropped lower, almost sorrowful. That cannot be ignored, nor can kindness. The boy, Kai, shifted behind Hale, bare feet silent on the porch boards. For the first time since he'd entered Hale's home, he spoke. Just one word. Uncle. The air grew heavier. Tall Eagle looked at the boy, then back to Hale. He is chosen, but choice is also his curse. You gave him bread, so now you share in his fate. The chief produced a carved bone disc from a pouch at his side, marked with 4 notches. He placed it in the dust between them. 1 moon, Tall Eagle declared. For 1 cycle you will keep him. Teach him your kind of strength. At the next moonrise we return. If he lives with honor, he will return with us. If he fails, the spirits will judge him, and you. The words hung like a noose.
The warriors did not move. They did not threaten. They only watched, waiting to see if Hale would accept. Jonathan bent slowly, picked up the disc, and closed his hand around it. "Then I'll keep him breathing," he said, his voice steady, "even if it kills me." Tall Eagle gave a single nod. The whip coiled back at his side. Without another word, he mounted his horse, and the Apache riders turned as one, vanishing into the desert like ghosts returning to the sand. The yard fell silent once more. But Hale knew the silence had changed. It wasn't absence, it was a clock, already ticking down. The riders had vanished like smoke on the horizon, but their silence lingered. Jonathan Hale stood in the yard long after the dust settled, the bone disc heavy in his palm. A moon cycle, 30 nights, 30 days. It didn't sound long, but he knew better. In the desert, a month could stretch like a lifetime. When he stepped back inside, Kai was still standing by the hearth, arms crossed tight against his thin chest. His eyes tracked every movement Hale made, not with curiosity, but suspicion. Like a coyote sniffing at a trap, ready to bolt. "You'll be safe here," Hale said. The words sounded clumsy even to his own ears. Safe was a lie in this land. The boy said nothing. He only lowered himself back to the cot and pulled the blanket around his shoulders, as if to hide from both the night and the man who had given him shelter. The next morning, Hale rose early, same as always. The work never waited. Fences sagged, cattle wandered, gates broke. Out here, a man either fixed what was broken or he lost it to the wind. He glanced toward the cot. The boy was awake, though he pretended not to be, staring at the ceiling as though it might crack open. "Come on," Hale said, pulling on his boots. "Fence won't mend itself." Kai didn't move, didn't answer. Hale stepped out, hammer slung at his belt. By the time he reached the southern fence line, he heard it, the faint shuffle of bare feet behind him. He didn't look back, just kept walking. Sometimes the only way to lead was to pretend no one was following. The day stretched long under a merciless sun. Hale drove nails into warped cedar posts, while Kai sat in the dust a few yards away, silent, hugging his knees. Each strike of the hammer echoed through the valley, steady as a drumbeat. After a while, the boy edged closer. He didn't speak, but his dark eyes studied Hale's every move. The way he held the hammer, the rhythm of his strokes, the way he braced each board before driving in the nails. When a nail bent sideways, Hale muttered under his breath, words sharp and quiet. To his surprise, Kai's lips curved just slightly, a ghost of a smile. It was the first crack in the stone.
By sundown, Hale's shirt clung with sweat, his shoulders aching. He leaned against the fence post, glancing toward the boy. Kai had picked up a scrap of wire and was fumbling with it, twisting it into a crude knot. Not useful, not clean work, but work nonetheless. "Not bad," Hale said. The boy froze, as if startled by praise, then quickly set the wire down. Hale didn't press. He only nodded once, as if to say, "I saw it, and that's enough." That night, they ate in silence again. Beans and cornbread, the same meal stretched another day. But something had shifted. The boy no longer stared at the fire like a prisoner. He glanced now and then toward Hale, measuring him, weighing him. Jonathan didn't expect thanks. He didn't expect words. But when Kai's eyes softened, just for a breath, he knew.
A seed had been planted, and in this valley, seeds were hard things to keep alive. The days began to find a rhythm: work, silence, meals. Jonathan Hale mended fences and tended cattle while the boy lingered nearby, always watching. He rarely spoke, but his eyes missed nothing. Hale had seen soldiers like that once, men who survived battlefields not by shouting orders, but by noticing details no one else did. One evening, when the heat bled out of the day, Hale pulled an old book from a shelf above his desk. The cover was cracked leather, the pages yellowed and dog-eared. The Army Field Manual, 1872 edition. He set it on the table and opened to a map of the valley, lines drawn in faded ink. "See here?" Hale pointed with a calloused finger. "Prevailing winds come from the north. You set camp on this ridge, you've got cover from both sides. Deer run this gully in the spring, always good hunting ground." Kai leaned forward, his eyes tracing the map but not touching it, his brow furrowed. Then, without a word, he reached for a stick from the hearth and drew a line in the dirt floor beside the table. "This gully," the boy said softly, his voice rasped from disuse. "It runs dry by day, but when the north wind shifts, it fills at night, not on your map." Hale blinked, then looked closer at the boy's line. "How do you know that?" Kai shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. "The stars tell it, the land listens to them." For a long moment, Hale studied him. This boy, thin as a reed, scarred as a soldier, wasn't just surviving. He was reading the desert like scripture. The next morning, Hale set traps for rabbit along the scrub edge. Old tricks from the army, wire loops baited with scraps. He came back at dusk to find them empty. Kai crouched beside one, shaking his head. "They smell the metal," the boy said. He pulled a small bundle of dried sage from his satchel, a remnant from the pouch Chief Tall Eagle had left behind. With careful fingers, he burned a pinch, letting the smoke curl over the trap. "Now it smells like wind," he murmured. Hale raised a skeptical brow, but said nothing. By sunrise, 2 rabbits waited in the snare. Hale let out a low whistle. "Damn!" Kai didn't gloat. He only said, "They trusted the scent." That night, Hale poured 2 tin cups of bitter coffee, pushing one across the table. The boy didn't drink, just sat cross-legged near the hearth, watching the flames. Hale sipped his own and studied him. "You always this quiet?" Hale asked. Kai's gaze stayed fixed on the fire. "Words are heavy." Hale nodded slowly, almost smiling. "You'll fit in just fine around here." The boy's lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smirk. It was nothing, but to Hale it felt like a gate had shifted on its hinges. 2 worlds had begun to lean toward each other. One measured in maps and manuals, the other in wind and stars. And somewhere in between, a fragile trust was taking root. By the 3rd week, the silence between them had begun to change. It wasn't the cold silence of strangers anymore, but the quiet of 2 people learning each other's rhythm. Jonathan Hale worked the land with steady hands. Kai shadowed him like a small echo, imitating without being told. One afternoon, Hale hauled shingles up the side of the barn. The roof had leaked for months, and he'd finally gathered the grit to patch it. From the ground, Kai watched, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You planning on staring all day?" Hale called down, hammer in hand. Kai tilted his head. "You'll fall." "Not if I've got balance," Hale said, shifting to the last beam. The board wobbled under his weight. "See? Easy as walking a line." Kai didn't look convinced. He scrambled up the side of the barn with surprising speed, bare feet gripping wood like he'd done it 100 times. Before Hale could scold him, the boy was already beside him, handing up nails one by one. They worked in silence until the last shingle was set. Then, without warning, Kai leapt from the roof, twisting in the air. He hit the ground in a roll and popped up laughing. It wasn't the quiet smirk Hale had seen before. It was a laugh, bright, sharp, alive. Hale leaned over the edge, heart hammering. "You trying to break your neck?" Kai grinned up at him, still breathless. "Cats land on their feet." "You're not a cat," Hale muttered, climbing down. "I'm better," Kai shot back. And for the first time since he'd arrived, his voice carried the lightness of a boy rather than the weight of a fugitive. That evening, they sat by the fire, the day's labor behind them. Hale passed a piece of roasted rabbit. Kai chewed slowly, still wearing the shadow of a smile.
"First time I've seen you laugh," Hale said quietly. Kai's eyes flickered to the fire. "First time no one's hit me for it." The words landed heavier than stone. Hale looked away, throat tight, the memory of his own past pressing in. He had seen boys whipped in camp, men broken for less than a laugh. War had taught him cruelty came cheap, and kindness cost more than gold. "You don't have to worry about that here," Hale said at last. Kai pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. "It doesn't matter. The spirits don't forget. My uncle won't forget. When they come, they'll see me broken." His voice cracked on the last word. Hale studied him, the boy's small frame outlined against the glow of the hearth. So fragile, yet carrying scars older than his years. He reached out, not to comfort, but simply laid a calloused hand on the boy's shoulder. "You didn't break, kid," Hale said, steady and firm. "You bent, and that's what kept you alive. There's a difference." Kai didn't answer, but his eyes shone in the firelight, wide and wet, as if he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to say it. For the first time since taking him in, Jonathan Hale didn't see a burden or a responsibility. He saw a son. The valley was still when they came, 20 riders pushing hard from the North Ridge, dust boiling behind their hooves. Jonathan Hale spotted them from the porch before the first shout carried on the wind. His old hound bristled, teeth bared. The man at the front sat tall in the saddle, silver beard shining in the sun, tin star pinned to his chest. Marshal Silas Graves. His reputation had reached Hale long before this day. A lawman who carried the law like a weapon, not a shield. The riders fanned out into a semicircle around the corral, eerily familiar, but colder than the Apache silence had ever been. Guns glinted, hands rested on holsters. "Afternoon, Hale," Graves called, chewing a matchstick between his teeth. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. "Marshal." Hale kept his tone flat, unreadable. Graves spat into the dust. "Word is, you've been harboring an Apache boy, a little spy." "He's 9, Hale said. "Age don't matter when it comes to treason." Graves swung down from his horse, boots crunching. "Town council's uneasy. Neighbors are whispering." "You know how it goes. You keep that boy, you'll bring fire down on every rancher in this basin." Hale's jaw clenched. "He's a child, not a threat." Graves's smile didn't touch his eyes. "That's where you're wrong. Children grow teeth, Hale, especially his kind." Behind Hale, the cabin door creaked. Kai stepped into the light just enough for the men to see him. A ripple ran through the riders. One man swore, another raised his rifle halfway before Graves stilled him with a hand. "We ain't animals," the marshal said, calm but sharp. "Not yet." He turned back to Hale. "You've got 24 hours. By tomorrow night, you put the boy out front. We'll collect him nice and proper. You refuse." His gaze swept the wooden porch, the dry corral, the fields beyond. "And this little patch of dirt burns to ash." The threat hung heavier than the desert heat. Hale didn't move. "You'd burn a ranch over a child?" Graves stepped closer, his boots almost brushing the porch. "I'd burn a valley to keep a spark from catching." Neither man blinked. For a long moment, only the horses shifted, hooves scraping the dry ground.
Then Graves tipped his hat, the gesture feeling more like a funeral bell than farewell. He swung back into the saddle. "Tomorrow," he repeated, "1 minute past and you'll see flames." The riders pulled away, dust rising in their wake, choking the evening air. When the last hoofbeat faded, Hale exhaled. His chest felt heavier than iron. He turned to find Kai standing in the doorway, fists clenched, eyes burning with something between fear and resolve. "I can go," the boy said, voice tight, "before sunrise. I know how to leave no tracks. They won't burn your land if I'm gone." Hale stared at him, the weight of Graves's threat pressing hard. He could let the boy run. It would be easier, safer. But he shook his head slowly. "Don't say that. It's true. This land matters more to you than me." "No," Hale said, firmer now, "it's not true. You matter. More than dirt, more than fences, more than this ranch." His voice dropped lower, steadier. "I've seen men die for flags and for lies dressed up in law. I won't let you die for their fear." Kai swallowed, eyes glistening. For the first time, he didn't argue. The valley was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt like a fuse waiting to be lit. Night pressed heavy over Dustwater Basin. The stars hung cold and sharp above the ranch, offering no comfort. Jonathan Hale sat on the porch, rifle across his lap, boots planted firm in the dust. The silence of the valley was broken only by the soft crackle of the lantern and the slow rasp of his own breath. Kai padded out barefoot, blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He stood beside Hale without speaking, small fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. The boy's eyes fixed on the ridge where Graves and his riders had vanished hours before. "They'll come," Kai said quietly. Hale nodded. "I know." "I can leave," the boy whispered. "Slip out before sunrise. Follow the ridge. They'll never find me." Hale turned, his weathered face hard in the lantern light. "Don't say that." Kai's voice cracked. "It's true. This land matters to you more than me." Hale set the rifle aside, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "Listen to me, boy. When I was your age, I watched a man hang for stealing salt. No trial, no mercy, just a rope and a tree." He paused, jaw tightening. No one stood for him. "I've lived with that memory ever since." The boy's eyes searched his, wet and wide. "Why tell me this?" "Because," Hale said, voice low and certain, "I'll be damned if I let the last thing you see in this life be that same cruelty. You're not just an Apache boy they fear, not just some name in their law. You're mine now. That means something." Kai swallowed hard, breath trembling. For a moment, he seemed younger than his years again, the frightened child Hale had found clawing at dry earth. Then he straightened his shoulders, as if drawing strength from the words. They sat together in the night, saying nothing more. Above them, an owl hooted once, distant and mournful. When Hale finally rose, he found the boy still standing there, eyes fixed on the stars. "What do you see up there?" Hale asked. Kai pointed, his small hand tracing invisible lines across the dark. "The hunter's eye. If it blinks, rain will come." He paused. "That one is the dog. You say it looks like a fish, but it's not. That's why you walk in circles." For the first time since sundown, Hale chuckled. "Maybe you're right." Kai turned his gaze back to him, serious again. "You are not Apache.
You are not my uncle. But," his voice steadied, quiet but strong, "you are my brother. Brother in white." The words struck deeper than Hale expected. He reached out, laid a hand on the boy's shoulder, not to guide, not to shield, but simply to share the weight. Thunder rumbled far off in the hills. Storm clouds gathered, crawling over the horizon like a slow tide. The air thickened, heavy with promise. A storm was coming, not of rain alone, but of fire, iron, and blood. And Jonathan Hale knew when it broke, he would stand. The journey to explore the Wild West is still long. Subscribe to hear more true stories. If you're still watching, drop a 1 in the comments. The night was too quiet. No coyotes calling from the hills, no wind rattling the shutters, no rustle in the mesquite. It felt as though the valley itself had drawn in a long breath and refused to let it go. Jonathan Hale sat on the porch, lantern low, rifle resting across his knees. The wood creaked under his weight, old bones in an older house. Kai appeared at the doorway, wrapped in his blanket, eyes wide and restless. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there, watching Hale as if waiting for permission to step into the silence. "Can't sleep?" Hale asked. The boy shook his head. He came forward and lowered himself onto the porch steps, small shoulders hunched. For a while they sat like that, side by side, two shadows listening to a world gone still. From far across the basin came a sound, faint, steady, low. A drum, then another, beating in rhythm. The Apache. Not war drums, not yet, but the kind of heartbeat that could turn either way, into mourning or into fire. Kai stiffened, his eyes darting toward the dark ridgeline. Hale set a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Not tonight," he said. "They're waiting, same as we are." The boy's voice came soft, uncertain. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Hale echoed. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that pressed on the chest, heavy with what it carried. From the opposite direction another sound rose, the faint clatter of hooves on stone, echoing down the canyon road. Lawmen gathering in town. Hale didn't need to see them to know who they'd be following. Marshal Graves would be sharpening his smile, feeding fear into men who'd rather burn a child than face their own unease. Kai pulled his blanket tighter. "They'll come with fire." Hale looked out at the horizon where the stars bled into black. "Then let 'em. Fire don't scare me half as much as silence." The boy turned to him, eyes shining in the lantern glow. "Why are you not afraid?" Hale thought of a rope swaying from a tree, of a boyhood memory carved too deep to fade. He thought of the way Kai had laughed that afternoon, free and unbroken for once in his life. "Because fear's already taken enough from me," Hale said. "It won't take tomorrow, too." Kai studied him for a long moment, then nodded. He set his small hands flat against the porch boards, steadying himself like a man about to step into a storm. The drums carried on, steady as a heartbeat. The hooves echoed closer in the distance, and between them, the valley held its breath. Tomorrow, the storm would break. Dawn came slow, the kind of gray light that painted the valley in ash before the sun touched it.
Jonathan Hale stepped off his porch, boots crunching the frost-bitten dust, rifle slung but barrel low. Behind him, the cabin door creaked. Kai stood in the shadows watching. The first to appear were the Apache. A line of riders emerged from the eastern ridge, their silhouettes cut sharp against the rising sun. Faces painted, feathers woven into braids, bows and lances glinting in the pale light. They moved as one, silent as stone. At their head rode Chief Tall Eagle, robe of buckskin trailing, eyes fixed on the ranch with the weight of centuries. From the west came dust clouds, Graves and his men. 20 riders strong, rifles laid across saddles, torches tucked against saddlebags. They fanned out with practiced menace, forming a half-circle that pressed against the Apache line like two storm fronts colliding. Then from the north road, a smaller group rode hard. 5 men, lean and weary, led by Sheriff Amos Rowe. His gray coat swung open, badge glinting faint gold. In his hand he held a folded document sealed in crimson wax. Hale felt his chest tighten. 3 fronts, 3 worlds. And at the center, his ranch, nothing more than weathered planks and dry earth. But today it was the fulcrum of history. Graves was the first to break the silence.
He reined his horse up near the corral and spat into the dust. Well, look at this. Quite the gathering for one half-breed boy. His eyes flicked toward the porch where Kai stood. Bring him out, Hale, and we'll all save ourselves some sweat. Tall Eagle's gaze cut sharp. The boy is not yours to claim. Graves barked a laugh. Not mine? Hell, Chief, he ain't yours either. He's a runaway, a thief. My counsel says he's a threat, and my counsel speaks louder than your ghosts. Rowe pushed his horse between them, raising the sealed paper high. His voice carried, firm and unshaken. Governor Harmon's writ. By authority of the territory, the boy Kai, known to his people as Little Wolf, is under federal protection. Any man who harms him answers to the court in Santa Fe. Graves sneered. Paper don't stop fire, Sheriff. Rowe's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. No, but law does. The air crackled. Warriors shifted in their saddles, bows ready but not raised. Graves's men fingered their triggers, nervous energy sparking like dry tinder. Even the horses felt it, stamping and tossing their heads, nostrils flaring.
Hale stepped forward then, boots steady, voice calm but hard as iron. This land's mine. The boy's under my roof. Anyone who wants him goes through me first. A hush fell over the gathering. 3 factions, 1 boy, and a valley that felt ready to split open. The sun broke the horizon, casting long shadows across Whisper Rock Ranch. And with it, the standoff began. The valley seemed to shrink, every eye locked on the 3 men at its center. Hale stood with his boots planted firm, rifle lowered but ready. To his left, Chief Paul Eagle sat tall in his saddle, hawk feather staff resting across his lap. To his right, Marshal Silas Graves leaned forward in the stirrups, eyes sharp as broken glass. Graves spat dust. This is a waste of breath. Apache law, white law, none of it matters. That boy is a spark, and sparks burn towns. I'll end this before he lights a fire. Hale's voice cut back, steady as iron. You talk about fire, Marshal, but you're the one holding the torch. Murmurs rippled among the men behind Graves. Some tightened their grips on rifles. Others shifted uneasily in their saddles. Tall Eagle's gaze never left Graves. The boy is chosen. His pain is not yours to use. Chosen? Graves barked a laugh. He's nothing but a runaway brat. You beat him bloody and called it sacred. Now you want him back so you can finish the job? And you
His eyes darted to Hale. "You feed him bread and think that makes him a savior? You're both blind." Hale's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "He's not a symbol to me. He's a child, hungry, hurt, and worth more than your hate." Rowe raised the governor's writ higher, his voice firm. "Enough. This isn't justice, Graves. It's fear dressed as law." Graves wheeled his horse to face him. "Stay out of this, Sheriff. You hide behind paper. I keep men alive." He gestured to his riders, who spread wider, rifles cocking in unison. The Apache line stirred, bows rising like a forest bending in storm wind. Tall Eagle lifted his staff, and silence rippled down his warriors like a wave. The standoff was seconds from shattering. Hale could hear the metallic clicks, the creak of wood, the low snorts of restless horses. One wrong word, and the valley would explode. Graves pointed straight at the cabin. "Hand him over, Hale. Last chance."
"You don't, and this ranch burns with both of you in it." Hale stepped forward, voice carrying over the field. "Then you better be damn sure you're ready to live with what comes after." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a torch flared bright in Graves's hand. He raised it high, flame licking the morning air. "I'll count to 3. But before he could, a child's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop!" All eyes turned. Kai had stepped out from the cabin, no blanket, no fear in his face, only resolve. His small frame stood against the firelight, and for the first time he was not a shadow behind Hale. He was a figure in the storm. The torchlight danced across the field, but every flame bent toward the small figure who had stepped into the open. Kai's voice was steady, though his chest rose and fell with each breath. "I will speak," he said. Graves sneered. You don't get a voice here, boy." But the Apache line stilled, and even Tall Eagle inclined his head, silent. The warriors waited, the sheriff waited, the valley waited. Kai lifted his chin. "My name is Kai. Among my people, I am called Little Wolf, nephew of Tall Eagle.
I was chosen before I could walk, marked to lead when my uncle joins the ancestors." A murmur spread through the Apache riders. Some lowered their bows in recognition. Others frowned, unsettled by the boy's defiance. Kai pressed on, louder now. "Yes, I stole the sacred fire corn. I do not deny it." Gasps carried across the line. Tall Eagle's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. "I was hungry," Kai continued. "Not in my belly," he pressed a hand to his chest, "but here. Hungry to know why tradition asked me to suffer while others feasted on strength. Hungry to know if I was chosen for pain or for purpose. And when I reached for the fire corn, it burned me, not with flame, but with shame." His small voice trembled but did not falter. "I ran. I broke the circle. I bear the scars you gave me, uncle, not with hate, but with memory. I understand them now." Tall Eagle's eyes flickered. Pain, pride, and something older than both. Kai turned then, facing Graves and his men. "And you call me a spark, a threat. But it is you who carry fire in your hands. You came here ready to burn a child for peace of mind."
"What kind of strength is that?" Graves' grip on the torch tightened, knuckles white, but he didn't speak. Finally, Kai turned back to Hale, and his voice softened. "This man fed me bread when I was nothing but a shadow. He gave me a place to stand. He is not Apache, not my blood, but he showed me mercy. And mercy is stronger than fear." With that, Kai stepped to the center of the triangle, where Apache, lawmen, and Hale all converged. He knelt, lifted the torch from Graves's hand before the marshal could resist, and drove it upright into the dust.
The flame stood between them, flickering but unburning. "If blood must be spilled tonight," Kai said, his voice carrying like wind through stone, "let it begin with mine. I will not run, I will not hide, but I will not be used." Silence. Horses stilled, bows hovered half-raised, rifles trembled in nervous hands. Even the morning wind seemed to die. One boy, one torch, one choice, and the valley hung on his words. The torch flickered between them, its flame bending in the morning wind. For one suspended heartbeat, no one moved. Then Graves's hand dropped to his holster. The rasp of leather was enough.
In an instant, a forest of Apache bows rose, arrows notched, strings taut. Graves's men snapped rifles to their shoulders, iron clicking sharp against the silence. Horses reared, eyes wide, nostrils flaring. The air felt ready to split. "Don't!" Hale's voice cracked like a whip, but it was swallowed by the chaos of movement. Then, cutting through it all, came Kai's voice. "I do not want blood." The boy's words froze the valley. Every bowstring quivered but did not loose. Every rifle hovered just shy of fire. Even Graves's hand, knuckles white on the pistol grip, faltered. Kai's small chest rose and fell as he took another step forward, standing beside the upright torch. His voice rang clearer now, trembling but strong. "I want something harder. I want peace." The words rolled like thunder across the line. Warriors who had drawn their bows lowered them, first one, then another, until a ripple passed through the Apache ranks. Some muttered prayers, others simply bowed their heads. Rowe seized the moment, raising his hand. "Lower your weapons," he barked to Graves's riders, "all of you." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then one rifle dipped, another followed.
The metallic clatter of bolts loosening echoed like a storm receding. The lawmen shifted uneasily, their anger bleeding into shame. Kai kept his gaze steady on Graves. "You called me a spark, but sparks can warm as well as burn. You fear me because you do not know me. Fear is not strength. It is the enemy of strength." Graves's lip curled, but his men were no longer with him. Their eyes darted between the boy, the torch, and the arrows still hovering in Apache hands. Doubt had cracked their resolve. Kai turned slowly, meeting Tall Eagle's gaze. "Uncle, you taught me silence, but tonight I speak. I am not broken. I am not running. I am Little Wolf, born of your people, but I have also learned mercy from another. Let me carry both." For the first time, Tall Eagle's stern mask shifted. His eyes softened, not with surrender, but with recognition. The valley exhaled, as if it too had been waiting for the boy's choice. The torches no longer looked like weapons. They looked like markers of a truce, not yet spoken, but already alive. Hale stepped forward, placing a hand on Kai's shoulder, not to shield, not to guide, but to stand beside him.
And for the first time since dawn, no weapon pointed at another. The silence was heavier than gunfire, every man waiting for the next breath to decide his fate. The torch still burned in the dust, steady and unyielding, its flame caught between three worlds. Chief Tall Eagle dismounted at last. His moccasins pressed softly into the earth as he walked toward the boy. Each step carried the weight of generations, and yet there was no anger in his stride, only solemnness. When he reached Kai, he laid a weathered hand on the torch, then on the boy's shoulder. "You walked through fire," the chief said, voice low but carrying, "and you did not turn to ash." From a pouch at his side, Tall Eagle drew a single white feather, bound with sinew and marked with red ochre. He placed it in Kai's hand. "This is for vision, to see farther than fear. You are Little Wolf.
Not because the spirits chose you, but because you chose to stand. Kai's hand trembled, but his eyes stayed steady. He bowed his head once. The Apache warriors lowered their weapons as one, a forest settling after storm. The sound of bowstrings easing carried like a sigh across the valley.
Graves, seeing his grip on the moment slip, snarled, "You think this changes anything? He's still a danger. He'll grow teeth just like the rest of them. You're all fools if you think one speech makes peace." But his words rang hollow. His men no longer looked at him with loyalty. Some avoided his gaze altogether. Others stared at the boy with something that looked like shame. Sheriff Amos Rowe stepped forward, the governor's writ still in his hand, but no longer needed. His free hand rested on the butt of his revolver, though his voice was calm. "Silas Graves, you're under arrest for inciting violence, violating treaty law, and attempting to burn this land." Graves laughed, bitter and sharp. "You wouldn't dare." Rowe's eyes hardened. "Try me." Two deputies rode forward, dismounted, and closed in. For a moment, Graves's hand twitched near his pistol. Then he looked around. The Apache line, the lawmen faltering, the boy standing steady with a feather in his hand, and something in him broke. The pistol dropped into the dust with a dull thud. A deputy seized his arm, twisting it behind his back. Iron cuffs snapped shut, the sound echoing like a gavel.
As they led him away, Tall Eagle lifted his gaze to Hale. "You fed him bread. You gave him a place. For that, you are bound to us, not by blood, but by honor." Hale nodded once, words unnecessary. The war that should have come never did. Not because of rifles or treaties, but because one boy's voice rang louder than hate. And as the dust settled, the valley felt different. Not conquered, not divided, but changed. If you like this video, please comment number 9. If you don't like it, please comment number 0. And please leave a comment and share your feelings. The valley was softer the next morning, as if the land itself exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The torches were gone, stamped into ash. The Apache had camped on the ridge, not as an army, but as guardians waiting for the boy's decision. Kai stood by the fence line with his small satchel slung over his shoulder. The white feather Tall Eagle had given him stuck from its folds, the red ochre catching the early sun. His moccasins were dusted, his posture straighter than Hale had ever seen. Hale approached, boots dragging, pipe unlit in his hand. He stopped a few paces away.
"So," he said quietly, "this is it." Kai turned. His face was still boyish, but his eyes, they carried weight now, the kind a child shouldn't have, but sometimes must. "They're waiting," he said, nodding toward the ridge. "Doesn't mean you have to go," Hale replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Kai studied him, then smiled faintly. "You gave me bread when I had nothing, a home when I had no name. But I am Little Wolf. My people need me." The words struck harder than Hale expected. He swallowed against the dryness in his throat. "Will I ever see this place again?" Kai asked suddenly, almost like he was afraid of the answer. Hale looked out over the ranch, the crooked fence, the patched barn roof, the cabin with its creaking beams. He thought of the laughter they'd shared, rare but bright. He thought of the scars on the boy's back and the way he'd faced fire without flinching. "You already carry it with you," Hale said at last. "This place, it's in you now. That means it never leaves." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kai stepped forward and wrapped his arms tight around Hale's middle. The embrace was fierce, boyish, final. "You are my white brother," he whispered.
"No matter what the world calls us." Hale's rough hand found the boy's back, resting there not to hold him, but to honor him. He didn't trust himself to speak. Tall Eagle approached then, slow and solemn. His eyes carried centuries, but when he looked at Hale, there was respect, not distance. From his pouch, he drew a small leather bundle. Inside were 3 things: a hawk feather, a red river stone polished smooth, and a sprig of dried white sage. The feather, Tall Eagle said, is for vision, the stone for memory, the sage to remind you that peace must be tended like fire. This is yours now, as he is ours. Hale took the bundle, his fingers lingering on the cool stone. Their eyes met, and no words were needed. Kai mounted the horse the townsfolk had gifted him, a young bay with a black blaze and a steady step. He looked down at Hale one last time, the morning sun behind him, painting his small figure in gold. "I'll return," he said simply, "not as a child, but as a chief." Then he nudged the horse west toward the ridge, toward his people. Hale watched until the boy became a silhouette, then a shadow, then only memory carried by the wind. The valley was quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. This one felt different, not empty, full. The days stretched long after Kai's departure, but Whisper Rock Ranch did not return to its old solitude. Something had shifted. Each week, riders came. Some wore dusty hats, others eagle feathers. They came not with rifles, but with open hands, trading, talking, listening. The ranch had become something it had never been before, neutral ground, a place where settler and Apache could meet without fear. Hale kept to his routines, fixing fences, tending cattle, mending the roof when it leaked, but he noticed the difference. Laughter carried across the yard now, not just his own muttered curses at a bent nail. Children played near the fence line, one white, one Apache, chasing the same lizard through the tall grass, their voices high and free. One morning, a rider brought him a letter. No stamp, no seal, just a painted feather and a stone drawn on the envelope. Hale knew before opening it. Inside, in careful English mixed with Apache words, was Kai's hand. "I have been accepted by the council elders. My punishment is lifted. They call me Little Wolf with pride now. I learn their ways, but I carry yours too. They ask me where I found strength, and I tell them from bread, from silence, from a man who listened. One day, if the winds allow it, I will return, not as a runaway, but as a leader." Hale folded the letter slowly, tucking it into the inside pocket of his old cavalry coat. He carried it like armor. That evening, as the desert cooled, he sat on the porch with his coffee, mug stained by years of use. The stars blinked above, the same stars Kai once traced with a stick in the dirt. From the western ridge came the faint beat of drums. Once they had stirred fear in settlers. Now, to Hale, they sounded like belonging. Inside the cabin, pinned to the wall beside the old rifle, hung the leather pouch Tall Eagle had given him. The hawk feather, the red stone, the sprig of sage, all reminders that peace was not an accident, but a labor, something to be tended, like fences, like cattle, like fire. Travelers sometimes asked why he stayed in Dustwater Valley, why he didn't sell the ranch and find greener pastures. Hale always gave the same answer. "I've already seen the most important place a man can see, the inside of someone else's heart." And when the wind howled across the valley at night, Hale would smile, remembering a hungry boy, a piece of bread, and a war that never happened. Because in the West, survival wasn't just for the strongest. Sometimes it belonged to the kindest. Maybe this story isn't just about a boy called Little Wolf or a rancher named Hale. Maybe it's about all of us, about the moments when life asks whether we will choose fear or kindness. In the dust and silence of the West, one piece of bread changed a future. And in our own lives, it might be something just as small, a word spoken in love, a hand extended when it's least expected.
The Wild West wasn't only guns and dust. It was choices, quiet but sacred, that echo across time. And that's why we share these true Wild West stories, because they remind us that courage often looks like compassion, and strength often wears the face of mercy. If this story touched you, stay with us, subscribe, share, and walk with us through more true Wild West stories, where history, faith, and humanity still ride together.